Hey, what is going on you guys? It's Epic here, and this video is going to be something a little bit different. Leading up to the 1-year anniversary of Borderlands 3, I'm going to be releasing a mini documentary review of each main Borderlands game. We'll talk a little bit about the story of each game, what we hate about them, and what we love about them. And first up on the chopping block, in today's video, we're going to be talking about Borderlands 1. So 2009 was one of gaming's most influential years, as absolute classics which would come to define genres were released. We saw greats such as the start of the Batman series in Arkham Asylum, the sequel to Assassin's Creed, Left 4 Dead 2, Minecraft got its official release, and Modern Warfare 2 released. To call that lineup breathtaking would be an absolute understatement, because this was easily one of the most powerful lineups we've seen in a long time. And now you would think that with such a gargantuan lineup of cult classics, there would be no way any other game could ever even come close to such heights in not only sales but just overall fun. And then in comes Borderlands, an open-world, first-person looter-shooter made by Gearbox Software and 2K Games. Borderlands was very obviously made as a very unique rendition of a Mad Max-esque world in which it's your job to survive the horrors that you might face along your journey. But the goal of Borderlands isn't just to survive being hunted, it's to hunt vaults. So before we get into our personal impressions of Borderlands, I think we should do a quick little story recap. So it all started after the Dahl Corporation supposedly left Pandora. This is where Vault Hunters Lilith, Brick, Mordecai, and Roland set their sights on the fabled vault. Not long after their arrival, they are contacted by a mysterious woman who we would come to find out's name is Angel. Angel guides the 4 Vault Hunters along their journey as they take down everything from flesh-eating skags to murderous psychos. Along the way, however, the Vault Hunters meet an archaeologist known as Dr. Patricia Tannis, who helps them learn that the vaults could only open once every 200 years, something that would soon go on to be abolished in the series. However, Tannis continues to explain to our heroes that the vault is scheduled to open soon. Very soon. So in classic Borderlands fashion, our 4 Vault Hunters then continue to hunt as they collect the key fragments for the vault key until eventually they reach it, only shy of Commandant Steele, who tells them,
"You have failed to listen to Commandant Steele. I've warned you time and again, yet you persist on ignoring my orders. The contents of the vault are rightfully the property of the Atlas Corporation. But you... you belong to me. He works! Sergeant, get your team ready to go inside. No!
Yeah, that's right. There's a motherfucking alien in this vault, known as the Destroyer of Worlds. But long story short, the Vault Hunters kill the monster and get nothing. There was really no loot inside of the vault like they had originally been promised, and overall they were just disappointed. Instead, the vault triggers off the events of Borderlands 2, which we'll be taking a look at in the future. So this means you might be asking me, well, Epic, if it was a lackluster story and they really didn't get much from the vault, what did the Vault Hunters do after this? Well, did I mention that the main selling point of Borderlands was that there is millions of crazy guns? From alien guns to fire pistols to shock snipers, Borderlands took a bunch of weapon parts and threw them into a random gun generator in order to make an ever-expanding arsenal of weapons for players to find. And this right here, in my opinion, is what stopped Borderlands from being buried under the insane amount of amazing games that released in 2009. They took an already very stale idea for a game and instantly turned it around with a 180 into an 11 out of 10 with only one idea. No matter where you go, no matter what you find or what you do, you will always find loot. And I promise you that. Borderlands proved to every other game developer that despite the limited amount of tools, you can still do something remarkable with them given the right ideas. And did I mention this was in 2009? In a time where hardware limitations were heavily enforced, Gearbox were able to add in a mechanic capable of generating over 10 million unique weapons, shields, grenades, and so much more. And this mechanic worked extremely well for them, as by 2010, a year after release, Borderlands 1 had already sold over 2 million copies. But now that we're up to date on what Borderlands 1 is and what Borderlands 1 was, let's talk about what players perhaps did and didn't like about the first game of an ever-expanding franchise. Because even though this game started a slew of looter shooters and also many sequels which we'll also be taking a look at in the future, it was not perfect by any means. And since this was really the first time Gearbox had ever done something this massive and this huge in terms of merging various aspects of genres together, something was bound to go wrong. Now, my first critique of Borderlands 1 sadly comes in the form of the story. I know for a select few of you guys it's gonna be a very tough pill to swallow, but I just do not like the Borderlands 1 story. I mean, sure, what I spoke about in the opener sounded cool, but in reality it's just not. You spend most of your time in BL1 really not caring about the main storyline at all, as it's really just not that interesting as a whole. And yes, it is cool to hear the first mention of Sanctuary or to see the first rendition of the Crimson Lance, but the main story just doesn't do a whole lot to pull you in, and even when it does, it doesn't do much to keep you there. You'll meet up with bosses that the game tells you are very dangerous and important people that need to be killed, but they never really get you invested in the boss you're fighting, so I wouldn't even say that I was invested in killing the Destroyer. It's issues like this which in my opinion really hurt Borderlands 1 and perhaps pushed a lot of potential fans away from the series. And now for my second critique of Borderlands 1, it has to be the color palette. Now granted, yes, Gearbox were going for a game that struck various similarities to many post-apocalyptic settings and were overall going with a very rustic vibe with Pandora itself, and you know, I would argue that the way they did it was okay, but one could also argue that the way they went about doing it was horrible. Areas like Old Haven or the Iridium Promontory, they just seem to feature a lot more color than the rest of the game. They just feel so vast and just so lush, and I just love them areas. But sadly, there are just way too many other places in the game that outweigh these locations, and if anything, they just make you want to put the game down. It's kind of just like someone vomited onto a canvas and called it color. Now yes, Gearbox would go on to fix this issue with Borderlands 2, however that doesn't in my opinion stop Borderlands 1 from being extremely hurt by the lack of color. And you could also argue that Gearbox made the right choice to go with such a lack of variety in their palette, as it helped to drive the overall narrative of the game, but I can't help but feel like that's just totally inaccurate. And now before we get into what I love about the game, let's do one final round on the DLCs. Now mainly the DLCs in Borderlands 1 are not that bad, and the General Knox DLC is still one of my favorite DLCs of all time to date, and the story in that DLC is pretty good too. But sadly, there are some really bad DLCs in this game too. And of course, I'm talking about Mad Moxie's Underdome Riot. So I want you to imagine this. You've just finished playing the Dr. Ned DLC and you had fun, but the overall drab tone and just moody, slow pacing of the DLC has got you wanting something more chaotic and bright, something to really get you in the spirit. And then in walks the Underdome Riot, a horde mode-esque survival in which you fend off waves and waves and waves of the same enemies you fought since release. Because Moxie, a character that we wouldn't even properly meet until DLC 3, wants to get a new husband or wife. The problem with the Moxie DLC isn't more so the idea, but the execution. It took an already overexpanded idea and executed it in a lousy way of basically just saying like, yeah, this is filler content. The arenas were lackluster, the arenas were dull, and they only featured one new mechanic, being the modifiers. Pretty much each round you would roll a new set of modifiers that would change up the gameplay slightly in order to make the waves seem more and more interesting than they actually were. The problem is though, this did not work, and people did not like it. But hey, I would be lying if I said that it was all bad, because the Moxie DLC did introduce one of the greatest features in the series that us fans would come to love, and that is the bank. This is a machine which could be used to put weapons in for your characters and could be expanded by getting storage deck upgrades. And the bank quickly became a solid feature and luckily has been in every Borderlands game since. Now, speaking of features that were a mainstay in the Borderlands games post Borderlands 1, I think it's time we make a shift here and talk about what we love about this game. And here to help me with this section of the video, I asked you guys on Twitter what you love about Borderlands 1, so let's get started. The first of which is going to be an obvious choice because it is one of the main selling points of Borderlands, and that is the loot system. There is just something so great and so satisfying about farming for crazy powerful weapons over and over again that makes Borderlands insanely fun, especially with the wide variety of weapons it brings. And then the DLC would only expand on this with new rarities such as the pearlescent rarity. These guns and shields would only become harder and harder to find, which made them more and more satisfying to receive in a chest or from a boss. And one thing that seriously surprised me is that the thing you guys seem to love the most about Borderlands 1 was the farming for hybrid weapons. I'm referring to guns like the Ajax Ogre or the Penetrator Reaver's Edge or even the Savior Bone Shredder. It's things like this which just really make Borderlands 1 stand out from the future games in the series for me as a whole. And while we're on the subject of talking about things people found absurdly fun, it's actually the straightforward approach the game takes that people like. I'm sure this is gonna surprise a few of you guys, but unlike Borderlands 2 and so on, most side missions in Borderlands 1 are fairly straightforward and don't serve as a mini story mission, but rather a fetch quest or a kill quest with little to no unique aspects to them. But oddly enough, this is actually what people love about Borderlands 1 for some reason, and I gotta be honest with you guys, I can't say that I disagree with them. I feel as though Borderlands 1's restrictions due to the engine really left a lot up to imagination, which is why so many people actually enjoyed the farming, as it always gave them something new to do and explore. There's also the unspoken pro with the Borderlands games about how fun they are in co-op, but I'll be honest with you guys, I don't really prefer to play co-op. I'm more of a solo player, which is why I don't have much to say about it, but I do respect that people love co-op on Borderlands, and some people even met their fiancés through there. So yeah, I would be lying if I said that Borderlands co-op did not make so many relationships over the years for so many people, but yeah, it's just not for me in terms of a co-op standpoint, but hey, that's all down to playstyle and preference. And you know, while we are moving on to Borderlands 2 in the next video, I just feel restrained when it comes to leaving this game behind, as it played such a huge role in my childhood. Despite me not playing the game often, it's what started this journey, and I owe it a lifetime of memories. Borderlands 1, while it isn't perfect, is still a timeless classic, and when I was going back to play it for this video, I couldn't help but just feel overjoyed with nostalgia and just fun overall. The game is just fun. And with so many new games coming out and now a next generation of consoles releasing this year, I can't help but feel like Borderlands 1 is only going to be forgotten by the newer generation of gamers, and that just honestly makes me feel really sad. Again, this game isn't perfect, but to me, this game is a masterpiece. However, there is another masterpiece we need to talk about, and in the next video we're going to be taking a look at it, because the game we're looking at next is Borderlands 2. Leave your comments down below about what you love the most about Borderlands 2, and I'll be sure to include it in the video, and also let me know what you hate and what you love about Borderlands 1 in the comment section down below as well. So until the next one guys, thank you for watching, please take care of one another and be kind to each other, and have a nice day.